Austria is a small country in Europe that Americans often confuse with Australia, but the two couldn't be more different. Nestled between several other European countries, yet highly distinct, Austria deserves its own list, especially when compared to its other German-speaking neighbor, Germany. To get a sense of what makes Austria tick, we bring you the top 10 things you didn't know about Austria. Not all German is the same, and Austrian German has a very distinct sound to it, even when it is spoken in the official Hochdeutsch form. Anyone with experience in the German language will instantly recognize an Austrian when they hear one. But it's not just the pronunciation, it's the grammar and vocabulary as well. Many words that are called one thing in German are called an entirely different thing in Austrian German. For example, the equivalent of a high school diploma in Germany is called Abitur, but in Austria it is called Matura. The expression am Morgen, meaning in the morning, is typically German, but in Austria one says in der Früh. In Germany one says dieses Jahr, for this year, but in Austria one says heuer, which is a fusion of the words heute, which means today, and Jahr, which means year. Even food items are different. Kartoffel is the German word for potato, but in Austria it is called Erdapfel, or earth potato, and there are many others like this. So next time you're in Vienna and some guy tells you Schlechte, you'll know exactly what's up. And by the way, it means piss off. Germans and Austrians might speak a common language, well, sort of anyway, but that is about where the similarities end. Austrians and Germans have been historical rivals ever since the end of World War II and have been culturally distinct for even longer, stretching back into the times of the Holy Roman Empire. In fact, Austrians have developed a term to describe Germans, specifically German tourists, whom they call Piefkes, who then speak Piefkenesisch. This derogatory term is used because Austrians view Germans as arrogant and demanding, especially when they visit Austria. It's likely that Austrians and Germans will never get along, but at the end of the day, that's what makes this relationship so special between the two countries, because, like a decades-old marriage, secretly, Germans and Austrians probably love each other. They just never say it in public. We've talked about the enormous burden of guilt many Germans feel regarding the events of World War II, studying them nearly religiously and having it hammered into them from childhood onwards. And many Germans, even 70 years onwards, still feel a kind of collective guilt for the occurrences of World War II. Well, not so with Austrians. Despite being fast allies of the Germans, and Adolf Hitler himself being Austrian, Austrians have never quite felt the same way as Germans do when it comes to World War II. In fact, in many Austrians' eyes, Hitler may have well been an honorary German. Whereas culpability might be overemphasized in Germany, in Austria it could be the opposite, and whether this comes down to the size of the country or more culturally related factors, Austria has definitely dealt with its past in a vastly different manner than Germany has. One of the most marked differences between Germany and Austria is Austria's long-standing conservative streak, whereas Germany is one of the most liberal countries in the world, and one that strives for multiculturalism and diversity. Austria has routinely rejected these tenets. In fact, when Chancellor Merkel famously made the statement, "Wir schaffen das," which means "we can do it," in response to accepting unprecedented amounts of refugees into Germany, Austrian politicians bristled at this, and to this day find the prospect of virtually unlimited numbers of migrants from the Third World to be utterly horrifying. For example, in a crackdown against migrants, Austria shut down its borders earlier this year in order to curtail the mass influx of refugees, whom they regarded as potentially dangerous and disruptive to Austrian society. Austrians are also far more religious than most Germans, and distinctly, and almost without exception, Catholic, whereas Germans tend to be irreligious, and the country is split in the south between Catholicism and Protestantism in the north, and this Catholic cultural background might be partly responsible for the differences. Additionally, Austria has historically had to deal with more direct invasion than Germany has, such as in the infamous Battle of Vienna in 1683, when the combined forces of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Holy Roman Empire landed a crushing blow against the Ottoman forces besieging the city. It is history like this that makes Austrians naturally cautious and conservative when dealing with the outside world, even today. You might think that Austrian food and German food is the same, but you would be wrong. Although there are some similarities, Austrian food is in a class of its own. Almost everyone knows about Wiener Schnitzel, which is a delicious cut of veal, most often pan-fried and breaded. And then there are Viennese specialties, such as Tafelspitz, which is boiled beef served with apple and horseradish sauce, and Apfelstrudel, which Americans, copying the word, call apple strudel, which is, as most people know, a sweet and delicious pastry often served with a scoop of ice cream and swimming in vanilla sauce. These are but a few of the delicacies that await the hungry person who finds himself in the great country of Austria. Vienna is a wonder in its own right, and a truly unique European city that distinguishes itself from the rest through its unique history and virtues. The capital of modern Austria, Vienna's history goes back to 500 BC, when the area that would later be called Vienna was occupied by Celtic tribes, and in time grew into the city that we recognize today. Vienna really came into its own when in 1440 it became the residency of the Habsburg dynasty, and still later became one of the most fertile intellectual grounds in all of Europe in the 19th and early 20th centuries, giving birth to such luminaries as Sigmund Freud, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and Gustav Mahler, to name a few. And even today, you can sense the spirit of high culture and intellectualism in the streets and architecture. Vienna truly is a city like no other. The Austro-Hungarian Empire existed from 1867 to 1918, a brief but glorious time for Austria, when it was born of an event called the Austro-Hungarian Compromise, which established dual monarchy of Austria and Hungary, with Franz Josef at its head. Both countries maintained separate parliaments that would often make different decisions, but the ultimate authority lay in the hands of the Emperor King Franz Josef. It was during this time that some of the great cultural wonders of both Hungary and Austria emerged, ranging from science to music to art and more. And one can only wonder, had it persisted, what other amazing works might have been produced. We will never know, because in the wake of World War I, the once great Austro-Hungarian Empire was dissolved, one of the briefest and most fascinating historical experiments to ever take place in Europe. The FPÖ, or Freiheitliche Partei Österreichs, which in English means the Freedom Party of Austria, is a right-wing populist party that has been gaining traction in Austria in recent years. It was formerly perceived as being very extreme, perhaps even echoing National Socialist rhetoric, but they have become progressively more mainstream in recent times because of their adaptation of more traditional conservative values as opposed to outright nationalist ones. Still, under the leadership of Heinz Christian Strache, it has pushed back against the encroachment of more multicultural, liberal-leaning parties such as the ÖVP and SPÖ, and the FPÖ strongly advocates against globalism and the erosion of native Austrian culture. Given the current trajectory in Europe, it is almost certain that the FPÖ will grow both in size and influence. While Arnold Schwarzenegger is both known as a Hollywood star and then later as a governor of California, he has humble origins. Born in a small village in Thal, Styria, in eastern Austria, Arnold Schwarzenegger has become an icon of the human success story, forcing his way up the ranks of bodybuilding and becoming known as the Austrian Oak. Arnold Schwarzenegger then emigrated from Austria to the United States, becoming Mr. Olympia several times, and then pivoting his way into Hollywood, where he would become one of the most iconic 80s action stars of all times, in such incredible films as Conan the Destroyer, Predator, and Terminator. Using his movie fame, he successfully campaigned to become governor of the great state of California for 8 years, and left office with the admiration of many Californians. Perhaps more so than anything or anyone else, Arnold is quite possibly the most famous Austrian export in the world. Austria has sure had its share of conflict and war, and at some point in time, Austrians just got sick of it all. So in 1955, a constitutional declaration of neutrality was made in the Austrian parliament, stating that Austria should thenceforth be permanently neutral in all manner of conflicts should they arise in the future. This desire can be explained by Austrian conservatism and the easily understood war weariness of that generation. This position and Austria's Austria First attitude has on more than one occasion caused tension between the country and the EU, but what the ultimate result of this tension will be, only time will tell. For more top lists just like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to check out our other lists. And thanks for watching, and thanks for learning.